Welcome to Biztech's CEO Conversation Show. NTT Group is a global technology group with 108 billion in revenue and more than 330,000 employees in over 80 countries and regions. NTT Ltd is part of that group and is a leading IT infrastructure and services company serving 65% of the global 500 and more than 75% of the global 100. Now, once again, we welcome you back. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brian, great to be back on after, I think, over a year.
Yes, exactly. It's about a year and a half since you were last on Biztechasia. A lot has happened since then. We've transitioned out of the pandemic. You've also had a lot of corporate developments at NTT. Walk us through this last one and a half years and how exciting it's been for you.
Yeah, thank you. Look, it's been great. I mean, obviously, just like many of your, I'm sure, guests have shared, coming off the back of COVID and coming out of COVID has been really important. We're seeing, of course, large numbers of people coming back to work. We've just recently had a big sales kickoff event in Bangkok, bringing together almost 1,000 of our go-to-market employees from across Asia Pacific, and just getting people back in the office and connected, Brian's been so important. And we've seen that scale up significantly over the last year and a half. So that's been great. In addition to that, we're seeing more normal levels of supply chain. So our supply chain situation's improving as well. So that's been very positive. But on top of that, there was a big announcement in May of last year. So about a year ago, NTT announced the creation of NTT DATA Inc. And this is bringing together, if the people watching think about anything that NTT has in its international operations, so everything outside of Japan, is coming together under a single brand called NTT DATA Inc. And that will include NTT Ltd, which is the business that I'm CEO of in Asia Pacific, but also a number of other businesses that are branded as NTT Data. So these are organizations, typically application consulting organizations, SAP partner organizations, digital transformation businesses. So we're all coming together into one organization now, which is incredibly exciting, I think, for the market.
Now, John, one of the key things that's also happened is from a business perspective, the business looks very different, even just from 1.5 years ago. Walk us through that transition in terms of some of the new areas of growth that you seem to have latched onto.
Yeah, Brian, I think definitely what we're seeing is we clearly saw a focus during COVID of, the distributed hybrid workforce, lots of people working from home, the need to make sure that employees could get access securely to systems in those sort of remote locations. And I think we talked about that last time. Some of the trends that we're seeing now, or in the more recent times, is organizations that are really needing advice on the way they need to deploy solutions into the cloud. Many of the early adopters, of course, are looking at whether they want to stick in a public cloud environment or maybe even move it back into a private cloud environment. Some are doing a bit of both, public and private, and they're needing support on how to manage and run and operate various workloads or applications in that different infrastructure. So definitely that whole area of cloud services, cloud advisory, public-private is a huge focus at the moment. Unfortunately, cybersecurity continues to be a big topic. And I say unfortunately, because I think it's in the public domain that many, and I'm an Australian, there's been some well-publicized security breaches in Australia in the last 6 months. And unfortunately, we expect to see that continue. So an enormous focus at the board level on even increased levels of investment in cybersecurity. Again, it always starts around advisory, then it moves into some form of implementation, then some form of operation. So we're seeing this play out in multiple different scenarios, whether it's cloud, cyber, it's advice, it's migration, it's operation. So cybersecurity is the other one. And another one, if I just pick on in an area that we're seeing enormous interest in, is this whole topic of private 5G. So this is the area where, you know, organizations, particularly organizations that are operating over sort of large geographical areas. So think of a massive production plant or a large mining site or a distributed sort of hospital network. Private 5G offers that, you know, incredible, those incredible speeds at really low latency as well. So the ability to connect large amounts of distributed data or data that's sitting on devices and allowing that to be connected and processed at the edge is the other big thing that we've really seen a lot of traction in the last sort of 6 to 12 months.
Okay, one of the key things that, and I'm going to pick on a few things that you just said, John. So cybersecurity, huge issue. In fact, Biztechasia, we have a weekly cybersecurity show simply because most of Asia Pacific is really lagging behind in terms of awareness. And as you mentioned, Australia has a lot of breaches. Countries like Malaysia has also a lot of breaches, and there are a lot of issues also, not only around the breaches, but the legalities and the compliance related to letting customers and partners know that breaches have actually happened. So there's an enormous complexity around this, which we tackle every week. The second thing is around what you said in terms of 5G, which obviously is an exciting opportunity for countries around the region and also companies. And you specifically mentioned private 5G networks. Could you kind of walk us through the use cases around that? If I'm a CIO, why do I need to deploy a private 5G network versus just the existing networks?
So often Wi-Fi, you know, Wi-Fi just doesn't cut it in these really complex, large, geographically challenged environments. So if you think about a large mining site with autonomous vehicles operating over large locations, so it often is that, you know, Wi-Fi is just is a technology that doesn't necessarily suit all of those different environments.
So John, would I be using it? Would you be referencing an example, for example, of a mining company, a mine in the Pilbara, and the trucks are actually in Western Australia, and the trucks are actually being run remotely out of Perth?
Absolutely, absolutely. That is a great use case or a great example of where we think it could be a value, or an automotive company, you know, who's producing vast quantities of automobiles and needs to make sure that these, you know, everything runs on software these days. So cars, before they're shipped out, their software needs to be upgraded and updated, whether that's into the latest version to run various systems that operate on the automobile, or for the target markets they're being shipped to. And often this has been done historically in some companies through Wi-Fi. It takes an enormous amount of time for that to occur. But private 5G, you've got the bandwidth is far, far greater. And you've just got much lower latency. So it's just way quicker with P5G, and it operates over a vastly larger geographical area as well. So, you know, for speed, for large amounts of data at high speed, there are certainly P5G would be an area that you would want to consider. And a lot of CTOs and CIOs are definitely considering that at the moment.
Now, you've just announced as NTT a multi-year partnership with SES to use its satellites to deliver edge as a service to enterprise customers. So walk us through this and how this fits into the whole private 5G initiative and networks.
Sure, Brian. So look, in some geographies, they don't have access to spectrum or private 5G spectrum, because depending on the geography and the legislation and the various licensing arrangements, telcos need to make bandwidth available for different parts of the market. Where that's not available, satellite is another viable option or alternative. So we're partnered, as you said, with SES to make sure that we can provide those private 5G offerings to in geographies where that spectrum is not available. And we do that through the satellite, the relationship with SES and their satellite coverage. So it's a low Earth orbit. I'm not an expert on satellites, Brian, but it's a low Earth orbit satellite offering that we're utilizing.
John, my research has also told me you've achieved in the last couple of years significant growth in your data center business as well. You've increased investments in places like Malaysia, Thailand, Japan, and India. Walk us through that and where you see the opportunities for NTT in 2023, 2024.
Yeah, so Brian, there's been significant additional investment in our data center facilities in Bangkok. We've got new facilities coming online in 2024. And this is all because we're seeing, as we've discussed, an enormous growth and enormous demand for these services in the market. So, organizations, large tech companies are needing to have an ability to hold data in markets, often, for a variety of reasons. Some of those are reasons around data sovereignty, etc. So we're seeing a huge demand for those facilities. We're not the only organization. There's a lot of investment in Asia in this whole data center space. But we've got, significant capacity coming online, particularly, as you mentioned, in Bangkok, in Mumbai, as well as in Malaysia and Cyberjaya there as well. So all of those markets have significant investments coming online over the course of the next 6 to 12 months.
And if we look back at 2021, I think the top of mind was, as you mentioned, the keeping the lights on, keeping the workforce connected. That was what C-suites were all worried about. In 2023, 2024, what are the key 3 things that leaders and organizations are most concerned about?
Yeah, so I think, look, the first one I would mention, 2023, 2024, is, of course, the risks that they face when it comes to these cybersecurity threats. So that remains every conversation that I have with a C-level, Brian, or a board level. It's always starts with a cybersecurity discussion or a threat-based discussion. And I say that's an unfortunate reality. But it's an important thing to acknowledge that's, before we start any discussion, we always need to make sure everything is secure. But then it gets, I think, really exciting, because organizations then are really looking at how they can further enhance the digitization of their business. So whether that's the way they engage with their employees, the way they engage with their customers, or the way they are just transitioning their business models to operate more effectively in the digital economy. Things like, and I'm sure you've heard a lot about ChatGPT, but we're already seeing organizations asking us, so how do we start to incorporate these sorts of technologies in the way we engage with our customers through various channels, the way we engage with our employees through various channels? So we're already starting to have those discussions. So I do think that's another area of real interest that we see moving forward. And I think that, we continue to see this general sort of transition of organizations looking at how they can free up capital to invest in more interesting areas of sort of digital transformation as well. So there is still a big focus on efficiency and things like network modernization. So simple things like making sure that our network can support the ambitions that we have as an organization in the future. And often it's not maybe not a super exciting thing for some people watching the video, but you can't transform your business digitally on old network infrastructure. So discussions we had around, for example, P5G, but other network modernization areas, 360 observability, Some of those things are really important factors for organizations 2023 and beyond.
So, John, this is against the backdrop of really global clouds, basically, encircling the economic environment, whether it's geopolitical risk, whether it's financial risks, whether it's recession risk globally. And is there caution creeping into the IT investment space where CIOs are saying, we're going to be investing to keep the lights on only, but we're perhaps not investing in anything more than that in terms of upgrades and updates? Are you seeing that across the region?
No. So I think it's fair to say, though, that depending on the market and depending on the vertical or the industry, we may start to see some of that. So typically, for example, where there's an election in a certain market, we tend to see a bit of a slowdown prior to those elections. But we're not seeing any significant impact. I think it's fair to say that through the latter part of COVID, I think a lot of CIOs were cautious around investing because of the concern there was with supply chain. I think some organizations felt, well, there's so much challenge around supply chain right now. Maybe I should just hold off and wait for things to ease up a little bit. So we're certainly seeing that ease off. But typically, my experience, Brian, is when economies start to feel a bit of pressure or there's a pressure on profitability or business often looks at efficiency, and there's no better way of driving efficiency than through technology, the adoption of technology. So my experience over many years has said that it's often during times where there's those challenges exist that the smart organizations are looking at how they invest in automation, different technologies to streamline their business.
So, John, then what should we be looking out for from NTT in the second half of 2023, 2024 in terms of new product rollouts, new opportunities, new things to engage with customers?
Yeah. So look, we're investing heavily, Brian. So we invest a lot in R&D as a company. So there's a significant continued focus on our network as a service capabilities. So whether it's SD-WAN, we talked a bit about P5G, just our network as a service capability. We're also investing heavily in cloud services. So this is, as I mentioned, around advisory, migration and operation, whether it's private, public cloud, making sure the clients are getting what they need out of it from a business point of view. Significant investments in our managed detection and response, our MDR solution. This is a managed security solution that we've brought to market this year, a significant investment from the organization. So lots of investment in capabilities that we can bring to market. But in addition to that, we started the conversation with the discussion around the coming together of NTT outside of Japan to create NTT DATA Inc. Our ability, Brian, to bring together our data center capability, our global network infrastructure capability, all of those managed services that we talked about, our capabilities when it comes to SAP, digital transformation, as we bring NTT DATA and NTT Ltd together. So infrastructure, application, and digital is going to be amazing. I think will be one of the leading systems integration companies globally, and certainly in Asia Pacific. And we're excited about that because I think for our clients, it gives them greater choice in the markets. We've got in many of our markets in Asia, we employ in the thousands of people. And I'm not just talking about the typical markets like Australia and India. I think in Singapore alone, we've got close to 2,000 people. In Thailand, I think we're 1,500. Indonesia, 1,000 people. So we employ large numbers of people in these markets. And it's important because clients want to deal with people often in their local markets. They don't mind getting support from global delivery centers, but they also want to have a healthy proportion of people in their markets. And we're making sure we do that as part of our investment going forward as well. So you'll look out for some more announcements, Brian, around NTT DATA in the hopefully not too distant future.
John, it's been a great conversation. Thanks for coming on and giving us an update on all the exciting things that you've been doing in the past 1.5 years.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Brian.
Now, we've been speaking to John Lombard. He's the CEO of NTT Ltd Asia Pacific. I'm Brian Fernandez, and you've been watching and listening to Biztech's CEO Conversation Show. This interview will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.